It's hockey time, people. Welcome to The Score with Brett Wiseman here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. This is the NHL preview edition of our program. Joining us from the state of hockey, well, the only state of hockey that isn't this state of hockey, would be from the lovely state of Minnetonka, Minnesota. That would be Christian Emory, who, since we last visited with him, seems to have acquired a mustache. More on that at 11.
Okay.
Still trying to get past that. I literally just shaved, so there's that. Apparently, I kept my playoff beard from when the playoffs actually ended until now. But
if it wasn't for the glasses, I wouldn't have it.
No, seriously. The thing that gets me right now is none of you saw him even like 3 years ago. He looks like a savant now. 3 years ago, he looked like a kindergarten teacher.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
See, part of the hockey part of this is we have to make fun of each other. It's called chirping. That's your word of the day. The other portion of this, before we dive in, is that the two of us, plus our good friend Will Flint, have a hockey podcast / show upcoming on this very platform that will premiere next week. It's called Third Line Grinders, and we know you're going to love it. But we're using this program to help launch that program. So, as you can probably tell, I am a fan of the St. Louis Blues, but we live in North Carolina. So the Canes are my second team. Christian is from Raleigh. So naturally, Christian is a diehard Hurricanes fan. So, naturally, Christian not too pleased with the outcome of last year or the year before that. So, before we kind of look at the grand scheme of not just the Hurricanes, but the NHL, psychologically, how does Rod Brind'Amour, Tom Dundon, the brass get this team past the playoff exit kind of fog out of the gate here?
Good question. First of all, they did not get swept, apparently. I was told they did not get swept, which was...
Rod Brind'Amour is very serious about that they did not get swept.
Yeah, but I think the way you get it is they know what they have, the talent that they have there, and the talent they acquired via free agency, which we'll get to momentarily, is they can just play their game. They know that they have the pieces in place. That's why they decided to run it back with most of the pieces. Some of them had to go actually, they didn't lose a whole lot, but there were some pieces that they were disposable. And they just decided, okay, we're going to give this group one more time or one more go at it. And I think they know injuries and puck luck played a big part in that playoff exit. I mean, you had their second best player, Andrei Svechnikov, hurt I think he was hurt going into the playoffs. And then there was no team that had experienced more playoff luck last year than Florida. And 4 straight 1-goal losses, as excruciating as it was to watch and as infuriating as it was. It was just some mental lapses last year. Like in game 1, you had Brent Burns turn the puck over in overtime. The guy had played nearly an hour of ice time through the 4 overtimes, and he just made a bad pass that went on the blade of Keith Tkachuk and no, not Keith Tkachuk. Sorry, Matthew Tkachuk.
Keith was there, but
Keith
he wasn't
was
on the
there,
ice.
But it was just a bad turnover, and Tkachuk was that entire series was the benefit of bounces and coming in clutch moments. So they know they can win. They just have to, on paper, they just need to stay healthy, and they have potential to make that point and potentially further. But all I'll say is last year, I don't think they would have gone. If they made the Cup final, I don't think they would have beaten Vegas. Because Vegas was, if you look at their postseason last year, they were a buzzsaw. They weren't losing.
Vegas was a wagon. And if they were losing, it's not like there was a one-off blowout in there anywhere. That entire playoff run, every one of the games that they won, they they won pretty handily. If they lost, it was either an overtime or it was a 1 or 2 goal game. There was an empty netter somewhere at the end that made the score look a lot more out of hand than the game actually was. But I think you and I and a lot of other people last March looked at when Svechnikov went down as, oh boy, there goes this team for sure can make the cup final kind of aspect. Because did you have depth at certain spots? Yes. But you didn't have the scoring depth that some other teams have, the scoring depth that you need to make a cup run. So now we transition to what the front office was able to do in the summer, and you said it, the few pieces that aren't there were just that. They were exposable. They were disposable. They weren't necessarily as important to the team and the chemistry of it as the guys that stuck around. Front office knew they were going to be able to let those guys go, and it wasn't going to create some kind of a massive rift in the locker room, nor was it going to create some kind of a massive pitfall from a performance standpoint. But they knew the guys they had to bring back, had to bring back, brought all those guys back, made some improvements here and there. When you look at what the front office did in the summer, looking at how last season ended, parlayed it into what they did in the summer, do you think what needed to be accomplished was accomplished?
Yeah, for the most part. I think you can always the typical what's the word here? The typical gripe that I usually hear with Canes fans, which I'm getting sick and tired of, quite frankly, is, oh, he didn't add scoring, blah, blah, blah. We should do it at the deadline, yada, yada, yada. You do that with Michael Bunting. The guy is coming to his prime in the last 2 seasons in Toronto. 2 consecutive 20-goal seasons playing with superstars like Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner. Well, Matthews more so than Marner, but Nylander. And he's going to, from what I've seen, he's going to be on that top line with, from what I've seen at practice or from training camp, it'll be Bunting on the left, Aho in the middle, and Seth Jarvis on the right. So that's going to be a line that could be your future line if you have them. I mean, I think Aho's the oldest one in that line. He's only 20. I see he's like 24, 25 years old. So he'll be there for a while. Well, he will be because they locked him up for the next 9 years for pretty cheap, honestly. But and then you have Bunting for 3 years. He'll be that guy that they were also missing, the guy who was not afraid to chirp and not afraid to mix it up and protect, and that grit that players you need during the playoffs.
See, he has that Matthew Tkachuk factor.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like Svechnikov does. Those guys, those two right there, mainly, they have that Matthew Tkachuk factor mindset where, yeah, they're goal scorers, they're skill guys through and through, but they have the body build and they have the mentality to go to the dirty areas, to go to the not so pretty parts of the ice, get in front of the net, battle, and then maybe mix it up a little bit after the whistle when you need to. And they also know the line as to when to back off, and a lot of times can draw a team into getting a penalty. We saw Matthew Tkachuk basically force the hands of the Hurricanes a few times where he just annoyed them so much that he got his team a power play in that series last year.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping Bunting is able to do. He, if you go back and watch his film in Toronto, he did get a couple of extra penalty minutes for some hits and stuff. But again, that's the kind of thing the Canes have. They've been missing for a while. Is they don't have that. They don't have that. What's the word? Grit that a team really needs to come playoff time. And then.
And when you look at Toronto opted for a different style of that grinder enforcer kind of player. They went out and got a Ryan Reeves and let a Michael Bunting go to Carolina because they felt like a guy with basically zero skill that is only out there to run around like a chicken with his head cut off and hit anything that moves He's not out there to score goals. Michael Bunting could do that if he wanted to, but he has more skill and 2 fingers than Ryan Reeves does in his entire body.
Yeah, and
that's where the difference is.
Yeah, and Reeves being here in Minnesota last year, I watched a lot of him, and that's pretty accurate. And he just doesn't.
I watched him play for the Blues for 4 years. I love guys like Ryan Reeves. I love old school kind of, I'm just gonna run around and hit anything that moves, even if a pane of glass moves, I'm gonna go get it kind of guy. I love guys like that. I love that old school kind of style. There's some teams it just doesn't work for. Toronto felt like they needed that, but a guy like Michael Bunting, you touched on it, played on a line with Willie Nylander, one of the more skilled guys in the entire league. He played on a lot of power play minutes with Nylander, Matthews, Marner, John Klingberg, I think, was the defenseman on that power play unit, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I
can't remember. Riley was out there, I think, as a D-man as well on those power play units, and Bunting was out there on the power play to create net front traffic, to create room for Matthews, for Marner, for Nylander. Now he's going to be on the Canes power play that you expect Shane Gostisbehere to quarterback, which is why you got him, because he is one of, if not the best power play quarterbacks in the league, statistically speaking. You pair him with Brent Burns on the back end, and then you've got Bunting up front there to create traffic, and then you've got you pick your poison as to who you want to put at center and left or right wing, whichever wing you want to put Bunting at that point.
Yeah, and I Gostisbehere left as a free agent. I'm trying to remember where he went.
That's right. Yeah.
See, where did he go?
Good job.
And Gostisbehere, he went to.
And we got Brent Burns. Either way.
Yeah,
you're fine.
Yeah, he is with the Red Wings. Huh. All right. But yeah, he left, and I mean, you still have Brent Burns, who can. Well, the guy's a Sasquatch on skates, as I've referred to him multiple times. One player that's still kind of but they basically replaced him or Gostisbehere with the guy who had the success doing it before him was Tony DeAngelo. They bought him back, and the Canes Twitter fans were not happy, but that's a whole different story.
That again. That's the opposite of F-150 Facebook, as LinkedIn decided to coin it. So that's another story for another time. But yeah.
But they brought him back. He was pretty effective as the quarterback on the power play. You have Brent Burns, you have Aho, you have Bunting, and the one player I don't know if they're the other player they bought in on their bigger splash on free agency, as far as I'm concerned, was Dmitry Orlov, who they signed to a 2-year deal worth, I think, $15 million, somewhere around there.
Which honestly, for him and the performance that he's put up the numbers he's put up the past few years in Washington, that was 2 years at 15 total, about 7.2 or 7.3 AAV for those 2 years thereabouts. That's a steal for a guy that was on a cup team in 2018 with Washington. It's consistently one of their best defensemen. Now you throw him, you basically replace Gostisbehere with him on that power play. But you look at the defensive core, it makes one of the strongest defensive units in the league even stronger when you add it to Jacob Slavin, Brent Burns, and just that entire nucleus of strength on the back end.
Yeah, and that's usually my counter argument for when I hear people say, "Oh, well, we need to go get a scorer," yada yada yada. That whole tired argument. This is not a team that is brought. When the teams zig, Rod Brindamore zags with this team. He's building the team from the back end, which unique style way to do it. But I'm not the coach, so. But if you look at the defense, Brent Burns and Jacob Slavin will be the top D pair. The second D pair will be more than likely Pesce and Shea. Third D pair is, well, but whoever they decide to put, they have a embarrassment of riches for the third D pair. the team may not score 4 to 5 goals a game, but they don't need to. That defense can hold other opponents to 1 or 2 goals a game on a consistent basis, and they don't.
And then you
They don't
take it
need that.
to Then you take it to goaltending.
Yeah,
A lot of people in the offseason were kind of assuming that one of Ronta or Freddie Anderson was going to walk, and the Canes were going to let one of them go and give Kachekov the backup spot. But that's something that you were pretty, when I kind of posed that to you over the summer, that's something you were pretty quick to shut down because Kachekov doesn't have a ton of NHL experience. He's shown great flashes when he's been up, but there's no substitute when you get to the playoffs for the volume of experience that those two guys have had the past 2 years.
Oh yeah, and I've seen a lot of people pose the question of, okay, well, my response is usually, just look back 3 or 4 years. Within the last 3 or 4 years, look what happened with Alex Nedeljkovic. He started in the playoffs after an injury to whoever the goaltender was. I want to say Peter Mrazek, but I don't think that's right.
It was Mrazek, yeah.
Okay, he gets hurt. Nedeljkovic takes the league by fire and helps the Canes make the playoffs. They ride him, and he gets burnt out. And that series against Tampa that they lost in 6 games, I think, you could see the physical and mental toll that having that pressure put on him. So having a guy in Kochetkov, who I don't even think is 22 or 23 years old yet, he's won he's won in the junior league or the AHL. That's fine. But playoffs are a whole different animal when you're in the NHL, and having a guy and Freddie Anderson and a guy who stood on his head a couple of times in a series against Boston a few years ago and Antti Ranta, you can't really have much of a better goaltending tandem than that when you have two guys who can both be number ones. And I thought Ranta was going to leave to be a number one after this year, but thankfully they got him back for a 1-year deal, and then Anderson back for 2, I think. And then you can still groom Kochetkov to be, have him as the backup, an emergency backup, and he can still get the experience that he needs to develop.
Right, and as for as many people as said, the 8 games he's played at the NHL level, that means he's ready. No, it doesn't.
No.
The 8 games he played were before the turn of the calendar in the past 2 years. Not even into the second half of the season level of pressure that you face as a goaltender. So, brings me to my last Canes-related question here before we move on to the rest of the league. You look at the way this roster is built. Does this team, when you look at it right now, assuming everyone stays healthy, but also factoring in, all right, one or two main guys might go down, is there enough depth there now as opposed to last year when Svechnikov went down? Is there enough depth to weather that kind of an absence to make a run at the Stanley Cup final this year?
I think, like you said, if everyone stays healthy, then this is probably the most well-rounded, put-together team in the league, in my opinion. From front to back, Freddie Anderson and Antti Ranta are a 1-2 punch. The defensive pairings, plus they're like three or four other guys who are just waiting to be healthy scratches. And then I think adding Michael Bunting will really contribute to that, because they'll have the ability to if Svechnikov does go down, you still have that 20-plus goal scorer that you bought in, and who's not 37 years old like Max Pacioretty was. Still irritates me they signed him. But, they have what it takes. Can they make a run? Yes. Will they? The playoffs are about puck luck and grit, and this team, we'll see if they can. I think they have a pretty good shot based on some of the moves all the moves they made, but teams in the division alone have made moves that have kind of made that a little bit more challenging. But long story short, yes, I think they can. Will they? That remains to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. It's the ability is there, the talent is there, the roster is built to make the run. The question of do they have what it takes? We can answer that. Yes. The question is will they? Of course, with the NHL and the way those playoffs go, as you and I both know, and anything can happen. You could have like the Boston Bruins last year. You could have the greatest regular season of all time and then just absolutely crap the bed in the first round of the playoffs and lose and get knocked out. Speaking of the Boston Bruins.
At least they weren't swept like Tampa Bay was a few years ago.
Well, they still didn't even have as good a regular season.
True.
But yes, Tampa was swept by the Columbus.
Before Johnny Gaudreau.
Yeah, before Johnny Gaudreau decided to waste away in the state of Ohio, but that's another story for another time. Speaking of the Boston Bruins, they don't have a captain. Well, they don't have the same captain anymore, although I'm not sure we can even call Brad Marchand a captain at this point. I don't know, maybe he's the captain of rodents. Captain of crying after losing in the Stanley Cup final. I'm gonna get a tattoo of that. I'm gonna get a tattoo of that at some point, just because it's one of my favorite still images of all time. Not just because the Blues beat him, but just because he's the one crying. Anyways, we'll get into that. We'll see if there's going to be a regression from the Bruins, baby. A full breakdown of the Eastern Conference is on the other side of this break. Welcome back to the NHL preview edition of The Score with Brett Wiseman here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. I'm Brett Wiseman. That's Christian Emory. Continuing to preview the National Hockey League season, which begins, Christian, Tuesday night, if you can believe that.
Yeah, I mean, it seems just a few weeks ago I was texting you, schedule accordingly. There are 27 days until hockey season.
And then, oh God, it's here. It's happening.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, it's crazy how fast the offseason goes by for every sport, but it almost seems like when you look at the NHL, it almost seems like it moves faster. But opening night's going to be a fun one. When we look at the triple header that's coming our way on ESPN. Preds Lightning at 5:30. Connor Bedard, who the city of Chicago thinks is Jesus for some reason, he'll be taking on the Pittsburgh Penguins. Trust me, I'll have more to say on that in a little bit. That's at 8 o'clock, and then the nightcap is the expansion special between the Kraken and the Golden Knights at 10:30. And then, of course, everybody else gets going Wednesday night, including the Hurricanes. They'll host the Ottawa Senators, who are not owned by Ryan Reynolds, unfortunately. That's a 7 o'clock game, and then TNT's got a doubleheader that night. Chicago Jesus and the Bruins at 7:30, and then, of course, Avs and Kings at 10 o'clock. The not-so-defending Stanley Cup champion Colorado Avalanche. But speaking of the Bruins, Christian, Patrice Bergeron's retired. There's, of course, no more Zdeno Chara. There's no more Tuukka Rask. Everyone that if you threw out a name and said, who's this guy play for? They would say Boston Bruins. All those guys are gone. Brad Marchand's your captain now, which I guess was your only choice, kind of.
I mean, unless you're going to...
It was either that, to me, it was either give Marchand the C or go with 4 alternates. Same thing with St. Louis. It was either give Braden Shen the C or go with all alternates. So you went with the guy that had the most experience, that had been on that line with Pastrnak. Pasternak's going to be an alternate, but outside of those two guys and your goalie, I don't know who you have, Boston. So I'm foreseeing a bit of a regression from them, because not only did Patrice Bergeron bring a lot of talent, scoring, bring a lot of points, goals, assists, He brought grit. He brought tenacity. There was a certain psychological aspect he brought with being the captain. I don't think anybody's scared of you anymore necessarily, and I don't think anyone's going to take you as seriously with Brad Marchand as your captain.
Yeah,
Am I wrong on that?
5'6" with Brad Marchand.
Yeah, no, but nobody's taking you as seriously or even close to as seriously with a little 5'7", 175-pound soaking wet rodent skating around with the C because he was the only option to give the C to.
Yeah, and I think you have the best season in NHL, well, regular season in NHL history. Let's clarify that. It's regular season.
Yes.
Playoffs, well, we all know what happened there. Anyway, yeah, I think they'll compete in the what's their division? Atlantic. Will they win it? Toronto might have something to say about that, but I think they'll take a step back. They have some young talent that they'll need to develop. And honestly, like you said, outside of those guys, whichever one of their goaltenders, I know one of them left. I know Brad Marchand's how do I keep this PG? A pain. I'll keep it that way.
A pest.
That's the best word that's the best word to use. You still have David Pastrnak, so those two will be on the same line. Who centers that line? Your guess is beyond me.
There you go.
And then
the perfection line is no longer perfect. Sorry.
Yeah, and then they'll probably miss not just his scoring ability, but Bergeron was a multiple-time Selke Award winner for best defensive forward. So they'll miss
probably, in my mind, probably the best two-way forward of all time. I mean, he got the most Selke awards, but even night in, night out, there's not a whole lot of guys you look at other than maybe a Peter Forsberg or a Pavel Datsyuk, or I guess you could throw Ryan O'Reilly in that conversation too, as far as guys in the last 25, 30 years that night in, night out, you could count on to skate a full 200 feet every single time they were out on the ice. He did that. I don't know of too many guys, whether it's on Boston or any other team, that are able to do it at the level that he did it. And when you look at their division in the Atlantic, you mentioned Toronto. You've got the defending Eastern Conference champion, Florida. You've got Tampa. And then you've got vastly improved teams below that. You've got Buffalo, who came a point out of a playoff spot last year. Florida eked in at 92 points last year. Buffalo finished at 91, so a point out of a playoff spot behind the team that eventually won the Eastern Conference. Ottawa was just 6 games out of a playoff spot. Detroit held the third, or one of the wild cards in the Eastern Conference for most of the first half of the season last year, and all 3 of those teams improved in the offseason as well. So I'm almost looking at this as going topsy-turvy, and Boston and Montreal are going to be the seller of this division.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't surprise me. I think Toronto will make it. I think Toronto will make that make this cup final out of there. And I think the one move in that division that's going to pay the most dividends is going to be Vladimir Tarasenko going to Ottawa. Like you said, they were 6 points out of the playoffs, and Tarasenko I think he can elevate that if you add him with Claude Giroux. It's Claude Giroux in Ottawa. And Ottawa has some young talent on the back end they can use to help elevate that. So I think Ottawa has a chance.
They've got great defensemen. They've got goaltending. They went out and got that. Not this past summer, but the summer before that, they went out and shored that up. When you look at their goal differential last year, Christian, they were at a -10. When you throw in good two-way forwards like Claude Giroux and Vladimir Tarasenko, and you couple those guys with the talent they have on the back end, and then the forward talent they have, they've got Drake Batherson, Tim Stützle, the other Tkachuk, they've got Brady Tkachuk, and again, they've got the pieces to contend here, as does Buffalo. They've got all the talent in the world. You look at Skinner, you look at the monster season Tage Thompson had last year out of nowhere. Of course, you've got Dahlin. You've got solid, good young goaltending. There's the guy that's last name is a game of Scrabble between the pipes.
I can't remember the guy. I can't remember his name.
I can't remember his name, but I also can't pronounce it. Even phonetic spelling is impossible for that guy. But
Yep.
Those two teams right there, I could even see making quite the jump. And I also don't think enough people are talking about Detroit maybe being a factor. And I don't think enough people are talking about Toronto either falling to the floor or just like Boston. I think Toronto's going to have a little bit of a regression.
Yeah. Yeah, they lost Michael Bunting. And I think that I don't know how many players they lost after their GM was replaced or fired or whatever happened there.
Which was a long time coming.
Yeah, pretty much. He's in Pittsburgh, but we'll get to them later. But yeah, I don't think the division I think it's come a lot closer together in terms of just from top to bottom. I don't think there's that one runaway team like Tampa has been, like Boston has been. They're all kind of closing in on each other to kind of make it a more competitive division.
Right. Outside of, look, I don't even think that you could look at Tampa or Florida and say that their one team is vastly better than the other right now. When you look at the standings from a year ago, from 3rd to 7th in that division was 18 points. That was the difference. Tampa finished 3rd in that division with 98. Detroit was 7th and had 80 points. 5 more than Philadelphia had at the same point in the Metro.
Poor Philly.
I'm telling you, there's not much more incompetent ownership in all of sports than that of the Philadelphia Flyers, but that's another story for another time. Let's shift to the Metro, shall we? And when you look at those Pittsburgh Penguins, as you mentioned, they didn't really make a whole lot of changes in the offseason other than going out and hiring Toronto's embattled GM. Of course, that is the Hurricanes division. So let's look at who finished 2, 3, and 4 in that division last year. The Empire teams, if you will. The Devils, they improved, I would say, in the offseason. And improved at the trade deadline. The Rangers went all out at the trade deadline and don't get to keep either of the high-profile guys that they went out and got. So, good job. By the way, Patrick Kane is still a free agent. Yep. I don't know if we failed to mention that, but yeah, he's still not playing anywhere as of right now, so that's odd.
I have a theory about him that I'll get to when we talk about the other conference, but...
Yes, please do, because I would love to hear it. But then you had the Islanders. I don't know what to make of the Rangers or the Islanders at this point. I'm looking at New Jersey, and I'm looking at the way they're built, and they're the only one of these 3 teams that didn't lose more than they gained over the summer, I feel like.
Yeah, they extended Timo Meier. I think he signed like an 8-year deal.
He's signed to the next millennium, I think, but
pretty much.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, Pittsburgh, or not Pittsburgh. The Islanders, they kind of just didn't do a whole lot, but
no, they kind of stayed the course. They didn't lose anything. They didn't gain anything. The Rangers lost more than they went out and got.
Oh yeah, they gave up way too much for not Patrick Kane, well, him too, but they gave up too much for Tarasenko. Was it? Yeah, Tarasenko last year, right?
That was a Doug Armstrong masterclass, is what that was.
Yeah, they gave up.
He ends up getting Sammy Blais back in that deal. I mean, think about this, guys. Before we get to the other conference, the job that Doug Armstrong did at the trade deadline last year for St. Louis, just outwardly admitting, yeah, I built a terrible roster. I'm going to sell off half of it. Something that St. Louis Cardinals management should take notes on about accountability, but that's another story for another time. He basically just said flat out, yeah, I built a terrible roster. I'm going to sell off our asset pieces here. So sends O'Reilly to the Leafs. Cool. What he got for Tarasenko? He got a guy that he traded for Pavel Buchnevich back. So essentially, he got multiple draft picks, Sammy Blais, and Pavel Buchnevich for Tarasenko cut. A guy that requested a trade 2 years ago. I love Laddie to death, but my goodness, Rangers, Doug absolutely fleeced you guys into a knot. And you look at what you gave up for Tarasenko, you look at what you gave up for Kane. Now neither of them are coming back. Tarasenko's in the other division, so you're still going to have to play him 4 or 5 times a year because he's in your conference. And Patrick Kane's not even playing anywhere, period, because I don't know if his hip's still in one place. But look, for the Rangers, all the success that they had a year ago, all the high expectations that they're going to have coming into this season, you're going to have to pump the brakes on them because the division they're in, the competition that they are surrounded by. Pittsburgh got better. Washington got better. Of course, you have Carolina, and the Islanders didn't get better, but they also didn't get worse. The Devils somehow got better out of already being in second place in that division. And remember, keep in mind, they only finished a point behind Carolina for first in that division last year. So there's a distinct chance, I think, that the Rangers could not just miss the playoffs, but finish in the bottom 3 of that Atlantic.
Yeah, the division from top to bottom, well, to a certain extent, get out of here, Philly. But to a certain extent,
yeah, let's get that out of the way. Philadelphia and Columbus, you're irrelevant. We literally do not care about you. Please go away.
Yeah, look from top to bottom. This might be one of, if not the most competitive divisions in the league. I mean, Carolina, New Jersey, they're probably the only 2, I would say, locks to make it out of those teams. And then the third spot in the Metro, I don't like relying on a core 4, but I think Pittsburgh, because they went all in and got Erik Karlsson, which I'm glad the Canes didn't. I can explain that if you want me to, but I'll
I would like you to, because that's, I mean, you've told me this before, but I'm sure other people would like to hear why you preferred that.
Yeah. So my thought about it is, this was actually brought up by a radio personality that has recently joined the airwaves in the Raleigh area, but I won't name drop. He pretty much said, would Erik Karlsson really make that much of a difference? The guy had one good season in San Jose. I think he had 101 or 111 points, something with a 1, with multiple ones, and was 100 something. Anyway, he had one good season, and he and Brent Burns played together in San Jose. They're like oil and water. They do not mix. You're not going to put them together on the same power play unit. And then, excuse me, even if you bought him in, where would you put him? You're not going to put him on the third line. And he's already proven he can't play with Brent Burns. So where would you have put him? And also, where would...
And to me, to agree with your point, you touched on in the first segment, the organizational depth on the blue line that the Canes have. You didn't want to give 3 of those guys up for, you can't guarantee how many years of Erik Karlsson, because even the time that he was in San Jose, he wasn't 100% for all but one of those years. All the time he was in Ottawa, he wasn't 100% for every one of the years he was in Ottawa. So you didn't want to give up more than you were getting back in the form of a 30-plus-year-old Erik Karlsson. You didn't want to give up 3 early 20-year-old defensemen for 32-year-old Erik Karlsson.
Yeah, and he was the one other thing I've seen with him is he has to be, how this works in Pittsburgh, I don't know, but they'll figure it out, I guess, or attempt to. He has to be the guy to be successful. And he was the main offense in San Jose once Brent Burns was traded here, or to Carolina, I should say. Can't really say here anymore. Anyway, and he had 100 and some odd points. If he's not the focal point, he kind of looks like he's not having fun. He wants to be the guy, and he's not going to be that in Carolina when you have Brent Burns, Andrei Svechnikov, Sebastian Aho, etc. Of course, Sidney. You have Pittsburgh. You have Sidney Crosby, Malkin, Chris Letang. That'll be an interesting dynamic to see how that works out. But
yeah,
he just. I was excited about the possibility when I first started thinking about it, but at the same time, there's a fine balance with this Canes team, and you really don't want to mess with that, especially a team this talented that can go and, knock on wood, compete for a cup. So
cons outweighed the pros on that
Exactly.
one greatly, in my opinion. All right, got to run into a break. We're going to get into the Western Conference and make some predictions when we come back. We are back on The Score with Brett Wiseman here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. The final portion of our National Hockey League preview. Yes, cue the music. Opening night is Tuesday. And we'll look now very quickly, briefly, before we get into our overall awards and cup winner predictions. That certainly will not be correct, but we will have to come back to at some point, I'm sure, and wear on our sleeves for the remainder of the season. You look at the Western Conference, my St. Louis Blues, it wasn't an ideal year last year. As we said last segment, Doug Armstrong basically came out and said at the trade deadline, yeah, I built a terrible roster. We stink. I'm going to trade half the team, and we're going to... Literally, Doug Armstrong came out and said, we're looking for forwards between the ages of 23 and 25, and we're looking for this many draft picks, and da-da-da-da. Like, he laid out everything that he wanted to do, and then went out and did it. And then drafted a couple of more underrated forwards in the draft who aren't going to play this year, of course, but that's how things work. I think... Excuse me, I got a little choked up. Talking about Doug Armstrong because he's so good at this job. That's why Team Canada regularly recruits him to be their GM for the world championships, world juniors, etc. But I think the Blues, they did what they needed to do in the offseason. You go out and get Kevin Hayes, you get some center depth, you give Braden Shen the captaincy. He was the only guy you could have given it to because he's really the most experienced guy on this roster right now. This is a young team. The Cup core, all the guys on that poster you see behind me if you're watching on YouTube, there's only one guy left on that poster. And it's Jordan Binnington. The other 5 guys are gone. Alex Petrangelo's in Vegas. Jaden Schwartz is in Seattle. Ryan O'Reilly's in Nashville. David Perron's in Detroit. Tarasenko's in Ottawa. Braden Shen, who's hanging on the jersey to the left here, he's your captain now. He was on that team. Pavel Buchnevich wasn't. Jordan Kyrou wasn't. Robert Thomas was. That's why he gets an A. This is also one of the more expensive defensive units in the NHL, might I add. Colton Parayko, Torrey Krug, Nick Leddy, Marco Scandella. That's a pretty expensive top 4 when those guys take up 40% of your cap space. So that's not ideal, but it was also a very, very bad season defensively for the Blues a year ago. A decade low goal differential of minus 38 for St. Louis. A lot of that due to the fact that the Blues defensemen mainly played like traffic cones for most of the season. Now, the hope is that all the guys that you're paying 40% of your salary cap money to will perform deserving of paying 40% of your salary cap money to. That remains to be seen. But you go out and get Kevin Hayes. That's really the only big move because you really didn't have a whole lot of cap space to do anything else.
It better than Calgary, everyone else. None.
Or like Calgary, who had literally 0. You bring in Joel Hofer to back up Jordan Binnington. You give some of these younger guys a shot here. because there's no Nico Mikkola. He was in the Tarasenko trades. He's still with the Rangers, I believe. But you have guys that made an impact last year. You picked up Kasperi Kapanen on waivers from Pittsburgh. He had a renaissance down the stretch last year. Jacob Vrana absolutely caught fire as soon as he came over to St. Louis. He had 13 goals the last 26 games of the season, which pretty much equaled his entire output in Detroit when he signed there after he was on the Cup team in Washington in 2018. So you want to talk about a renaissance or a change of scenery being the best thing for somebody. Jacob Vrana going to St. Louis, that's the best thing that could have happened to him. He's going to be a main cog there. Of course, you've still got Brandon Saad on the wing as well. I think this is a St. Louis team that can be good again, that can make the playoffs again. I know I'm biased, but when you look at their division, I don't think we're going to see the same Winnipeg Jets we saw a year ago. I don't think we're going to see the same Nashville Predators we saw a year ago that almost sold at the trade deadline and then won like 20 of their last 23 games and were a handful of points out of that second wild card in the Western Conference, 3 points behind Winnipeg. I don't think either of those teams we're going to see what we saw out of them last year. I think what we saw out of them last year was in part due to the fact that the Blues were having a dismal year. The Blues, I think, are going to jump those two. So then you look at I like to call them the core four of the Central Division. Arizona, irrelevant. Chicago, they all think Connor Bedard is Jesus. They think he walks on water and turns the sewer water in Chicago into wine and, skates circles around that lima bean in the middle of the city and, works miracles, cures leprosy, all this. Is he an insanely talented player?
No.
Yeah. Probably the most talented player to be draft eligible since Connor McDavid.
Yeah, pretty much.
He's not God. He's not going to tell you to build an ark. Okay?
If anything, it'll be a sled, but
he's not going to save the world. He's not going to save your world.
No.
Okay? He's Connor Bedard. He's not Connor McJesus. Okay?
Yep,
Connor McJesus plays at Edmonton. There's a difference.
True. Yeah. And that was
the problems that the Blackhawks have are not solved by one 19-year-old from Regina, Saskatchewan. I'm sorry.
No, and with actually, what I was referring to is the theory I had. It's actually I think I've told you this, but my boss for where I work now is a Blackhawks fan.
My apologies to him. It's a terrible.
Well, he said the same thing, but when I told him you were a Blues fan, so. But his theory, he was
raised incorrectly. But
his theory was that Chicago might go out and try to get Patrick Kane back to try to help.
That would be. Look, I'm not even worried about that because that would just be hilarious. Because Patrick Kane's a third of the player he once was. We don't even know if his hip's in one place at this point.
Yeah.
Just because his agent is tweeting out videos of him skating doesn't mean that he's going to return to form.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just like, if you want to do that, more power to you. Bring him home to the town that he won 3 cups with. But it's only going to be for a season or two. I mean, you're not bringing back Jonathan Taves. He's not coming through that door. He's done
He's done. He's done playing hockey. Period.
Yeah.
And if he comes back, he's not playing there. Period.
Yeah, it'll be in Edmonton probably. But
yep.
But yeah, that was just my kind of. I can see it happening, but would it really make that much of an impact? Hard to say because he didn't do a whole lot with the Rangers last year. But I'm like, for a 3-time champion to tutor your.
He's the right guy to have in that role. Because if you're Chicago, you're still not looking to compete, to contend this year. As a lot of their fans would lead you to believe otherwise. You're not looking to, at this point, you're looking to finish ahead of Arizona. I think that's the goal. You're looking to finish 7th, not 8th this time around.
Yep.
Which Maybe easier said than done because Arizona may not be as bad as they were last year. I don't know. But the core four of the Central, Colorado, Dallas, Minnesota, St. Louis, those four are going to finish in some form or fashion in some order 1, 2, 3, 4. Colorado, I would probably peg to win this division. Minnesota, I would probably peg to jump Dallas at this point. Dallas, I think, is going to take a step down from where they were last year. It's going to be up to those two who finishes third and who finishes fourth between Dallas and St. Louis. Then you look at the Pacific. Is this, Christian, finally the year that the Edmonton Oilers can get over the hump? I think so. I think so.
What? Are you asking win the division or go all the way to the Cup final?
Both.
I think they can win the division because Vegas lost a lot.
Remember, they were only 2 points back of Vegas for that division crown a year ago. So
yeah, and they played each other, I think, 6 or 7 games in the playoffs last year in a fantastic series. If you like,
it did, yeah.
And then I think Vegas has a chance to take a step back due to all of their cap gymnastics, for lack of a better word.
That's the right word.
Biting them this year. They're going to lose some talent, and I think Edmonton has the chance to win the division. They certainly didn't get worse over the offseason. I mean, you still have the best, probably still have the best player in the league in Connor McDavid. So I think there's a good chance they win the division. Going to the Cup final, it's kind of hard right now to see a team that's more well-rounded in the Western
I don't see a team in either division that's better than them right now. Because you said it, I think Vegas is going to take a little bit of a step back here. You're going to see the same thing happen to them that happened to Tampa Bay, which is you do all this salary cap circumvention for a year or two, which they've done, and now you see Tampa Bay's having to offload certain guys. There's certain guys they simply just can't afford to bring back. Vegas had to trade off a guy in Riley Smith that they loved to death. They just literally could not afford to keep him on the roster. So they had to make that trade. I think you're going to see that come to fruition a little bit in the fact that they gave up so much to get Jack Eichel. They signed him to that massive contract, and now they're going to have to reap the consequences of that contract eating up as much cap space as it is for the performance that you're getting out of him. Look, I could see Vegas even finishing third in this division, or maybe even being a wild card. I could see them dropping that far. I think Calgary is going to be vastly improved this year. I don't think they're any too pleased with what happened a year ago. They've got high expectations coming into the year. I think we could see a better Vancouver team than we've seen in recent years. I don't think they'll make the playoffs, but I think they'll scare enough people towards the end of the season to make people's legs wobble a little bit towards the wild card part in the Western Conference. But I don't see a team even in the Central either. I don't see Colorado or Dallas or Minnesota or anyone else being any better than Edmonton. The only question is goaltending, but I think this is going to be the year for them. I think this is the year they get over the hump.
Yeah, they like think we both said, it's hard to see a more well-rounded team in the Western Conference than Edmonton. And
right, and over the past couple of years, there have been cracks and holes that they've been able to fill.
Yeah, exactly.
And now that they have all those pieces in place, and Vegas is no longer a salary cap circumventing gauntlet, I think they're able to get over that hump. All right, very quickly, give me your major award predictions. Give me your Vezina winner, your Hart Trophy winner, and your Conn Smythe winner.
Okay, so started with the Vezina for best goaltender. That's a tough one because I can see a few different players winning it, but it's kind of hard to bet against what's his name? Vasilevsky in Tampa, but we'll see how Tampa does since they've kind of gone down a peg, but hard to bet against Vasilevsky. And then what was the second one?
Your Hart Trophy winner, and then your Cup winner / Conn Smythe winner.
Hart Trophy is the MVP, essentially the MVP, and it's kind of hard to bet against Connor McDavid if Edmonton's going to do what we think they're going to do. And then the Cup final. As much as I want to say it, it's hard to because we don't know what's going to happen. But if it comes down to a rematch of a Cup final from 17 years ago, I would not have a problem with that because that would be great. I'd love to see how the Canes would match up with Connor McDavid, especially with that defense. This is just based on paper. We haven't seen the product on the ice yet. This is just based on paper. You know what? Just based on paper, let's go with that rematch of the Hurricanes and the Oilers. In the Cup final.
I'm with you. That's my prediction. Even before you said anything, that was going to be my prediction anyways. But unfortunately, I'm going to go with Edmonton winning that series in 7. And McDavid's not only going to win the Hart Trophy, he's going to win the Conn Smythe for playoff MVP. Vezina winner, this might shock some people. Spencer Knight's going to have a resurgent season with the Florida Panthers. Think he's going to absolutely stand on his head. He's going to steal the starting job from Sergei Bobrovsky, and he's going to win the Vezina. Book it. I said it.
It's not a bad pick, all things considered. I can definitely see that. Florida's going to need goaltending. I mean, they have the offense. Their defense is they got to rid of some pieces, so they're going to need some help on the back end. But as far as my Conn Smythe, I think if that matchup comes to fruition, it will be Connor McDavid. If the Oilers win it, if it's the Hurricanes, it'll have to be either Sebastian Aho or Andrei Svechnikov.
I think those would be the only two logical choices the Canes were able to win that series. Christian Emory from the state of hockey, other state of hockey, that is. Thanks for coming on here to the NHL preview edition of The Score. Reminder, Third Line Grinders, the new Tobacco Road Sports Radio hockey podcast premieres this week. Enjoy opening week in the NHL, everybody. That's hockey, baby.